Good day, dear participants of the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit. Greetings from Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you all for joining us for what promises to be a very interesting panel discussion on the experiences from Indonesia on transitioning towards more sustainable corporate practices. I am Sophie Kemkhadze, Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP Indonesia, and it is my great pleasure to moderate today's event, which is brought to you by the Indonesia Global Compact Network. Over the next 45 minutes, our panel members will zoom into the discussion on sustainable corporate practices from Indonesia. But before I introduce them to you, I'd like to talk about where we are in terms of achieving our global sustainability targets and why sustainable corporate practices are important. In just over 3 months, we will mark the 6th anniversary of the ambitious 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. According to the SDG Report 2020, Indonesia is on track towards achieving most of the targets. At the same time, Indonesia has progressed moderately towards meeting clean energy targets. The importance of the clean energy agenda on a global scale is evident by upcoming high-level dialogue on energy called by the UN General Assembly for later this year. It is the first UN summit on energy since 1981. This year also marks 6 years since 197 countries, including Indonesia, signed the Paris Agreement on climate change. With the global demand for decarbonization, the importance of sustainable corporate practices has gained traction in discussions about climate action. Informed consumers in Indonesia and around the world have increasingly demanded that the corporate world and state-owned companies integrate their business models with SDG principles that better protect our planet and improve the lives of communities at large. Although the COVID-19 pandemic has caused many setbacks, the pandemic also provides a real opportunity to revamp our development and business models and redirect it towards a low-carbon pathway that is greener and more inclusive. At UNDP, we are committed to supporting stakeholders in Indonesia, expand investment in renewable energy, promote energy efficiency, and increase access to clean energy. We also have been working with government and private sector to establish a carbon market to provide additional financial resources for investment in renewable energy through the implementation of a cap and trade policy on the power generation sector. While government action is paramount, the private sector is just as important in achieving clean energy and net zero emissions targets. So today, we have an opportunity to explore the issue closer with the representatives from different sectors. We have Ms. Amanda Katili Niode, Manager of the Climate Reality Project Indonesia, Mr. Hendra Tan, CEO of the Star Energy Geothermal Group, and Mr. Zulkifli Zaini, President Director, PT Perusahaan Listrik Negara. Together, we will unpack the agenda of transitioning towards more sustainable corporate practices from the Indonesian perspective. I'd like to start today's discussion by inviting Ms. Amanda Katili Niode, PhD, the manager of the Climate Reality Project, to share her views with us on Indonesia's perspective on sustainable development challenges and opportunities and how to address them. The Climate Reality Project Indonesia is part of a global organization that mainstreams the climate risks and its solutions and actions. Ibu Amanda is an environmental management specialist, educator, and writer. She holds a PhD from the University of Michigan, USA, and is a founding member of the International Environmental Communication Association, Previously, she was the head of the expert team at the Office of the President's Special Envoy for Climate Change in Indonesia. Ibu Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today. Ibu Amanda, from your knowledge and rich experience, what are the challenges in addressing environmental issues in Indonesia, especially with regards to advancing Sustainable Development Goal number 13 on climate action?
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this prestigious event. Allow me to begin with the underlying theory why there are environmental issues, and that is the tragedy of the commons, a situation in which individuals with access to a shared resource, also called a common, act in their own interest, and in doing so ultimately deplete the resource. Example of the tragedy of the commons are deforestation, animal extinction, and of course the climate crisis. Now, the challenges in advancing SDG 13 or climate actions, there are several actually identified a few years ago by the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, or UNITAR. And I think the challenges apply to most countries. These are, first, the diverse sector of government, for example, agriculture, finance, and transport. The second one is different levels of governance, for example, national, subnational, and local level of governance. The third one is the multitude of concerned groups, such as private sector. And the last challenge, or the fourth challenge, are the complex issues such as modeling, population dynamics, disease patterns, and climate justice. And it is important to recognize that the 17 SDGs are integrated, meaning that action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability.
Thank you very much, Ibu Amanda. Noted on your point on integrated approach to sustainable development goals and also importance of partnerships if we are serious about delivering on our promise on 2030 agenda. Well, we are seeing an increase in the need for private companies to take a more active role in sustainable practices. So how do you see the corporate world here in Indonesia playing their role in transitioning to more sustainable corporate practices, and what are some of the challenges they encounter?
Right. The transitioning into sustainable practices, of course, will be of interest when there are opportunities such as profit-driven or policy-driven, as well as networking among like-minded entities. Networkings in Indonesia have helped encourage companies understand the benefits and how-tos of sustainable practices. Specific organizations include, of course, the Indonesia Global Compact Network and the Indonesian Business Council for Sustainable Development. Also, there are associations based on commodities such as paper, forest, food, agriculture, and textiles. The challenges I have mentioned earlier refer to the 4 challenges identified by UNITAR. And in addition, there are also aspects such as technology and financing that have to be taken into consideration. But most important, that will be the attention of the private sector is, of course, the policies that have to be consistent and not conflicting.
Indeed, Ibu Amanda, it is important to create a positive pressure, as you say, and promote networking of like-minded entities. Now, what are some actions you'd recommend to help accelerate the implementation of low-carbon practices?
I would like to refer to the Paris Agreement agreed in 2015 that recognizes the importance of climate change education, training, public awareness, public participation, and public access to information, and ask parties or countries to cooperate in taking appropriate measures. I would like to focus on training specifically. Technical knowledge and information, as we know, are abundant, but we know the devil is in the details. Some aspects are inclusive participants on the ground and hands-on activities. Also important to really think or really study the futuristic explorations, thinking at least 10 years ahead, as the impact of the climate crisis is long-term. And also, of course, in organizations where position hierarchy is still strong, superiors and subordinates participation is very important. And nowadays, especially during the pandemic, mastering digital tools is unavoidable, especially, like I said, during this situation. Now, another important aspect that people rarely talk about is low carbon coaching in companies. Coaching is partnering with individuals or groups in thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. By having low carbon coaching, then the actions will be bottom up and not only top down.
Thank you very much, Ibu Amanda. I'd like now to invite Mr. Hendra Tan, Group CEO of the Star Energy Geothermal, for sharing his perspective. Pak Hendra holds a master's degree in engineering from Cornell University and has more than 20 years of experience in the finance industry. At present, he is the Group Chief Executive Officer of Star Energy Geothermal Group and is leading the company to be the leading and largest geothermal producer in the world by increasing its capacity to 1,200 megawatt by 2028 through its 5 geothermal projects in Indonesia. Pak Hendra, thank you so much for joining us today, and let's speak about geothermal energy. So, where does geothermal stand currently compared to other types of renewable energy?
Yeah. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you for having me. So last year's the International Renewable Energy Agency, ARENA, published a report which compared the LCOE of renewable power generation between 2010 to 2019. So with the exceptions of geothermal and hydro, the LCOE of other renewable power generations cost between 2010 to 2019, especially wind and solar, has dropped significantly. So LCOE of solar dropped by an impressive 82%. LCOE of onshore wind dropped by 38%. So on contrary, LCOE of geothermal power generation increased by 50% during the same period, whilst LCOE of hydro increased by 27%. And interestingly, LCOE of fossil fuel costs dropped by 13.1% during the same period. So this report indicates that unfortunately, geothermal power generation is now become the most expensive renewable energy source. This is a very sad story for industry player like us, and a wake-up call for us as one of the largest geothermal energy producer in the world to do something about it.
Hendra, so you are saying that geothermal is now the most expensive renewable energy source globally. What is your assessment? Why do you think this is the case?
Well, I think the main reason is because within those periods, unlike wind and solar generation development, there are not enough big development of geothermal power plant. So for example, between 2000 to 2019, there are additional 540,000 megawatts of solar generations. As comparisons, there are only 4,000 megawatts of newly installed geothermal development. So that additional 4,000 megawatt does not create enough economy of scales or give enough momentum to drive technology breakthrough or innovation in geothermal industry to find a more powerful and efficient geothermal generation turbine, or how to reduce the geothermal resources uncertainty. Yeah. So this is why starting 2018, with the full support of our major shareholders, Barito Pacific Group, we are initiating a serious effort to find a technology breakthrough or innovation on those two areas to make geothermal energy more sustainable, more competitive compared to others renewable energy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if I got your figures right, then we saw 50% increase in geothermal generation over the course of 9 years, starting 2010. However, the starting point, as you are saying, was so low that this pace is indeed not sufficient for reaching required scale in the near future. And your group is working to break this vicious circle around the geothermal. I'm sure our audience would be interested to know about the know-how and innovations that Star Energy Geothermal implements to make geothermal energy more competitive compared to other renewables.
Okay. So in geothermal power plant development, the cost to extract geothermal resources and the reliability and efficiency of our turbine, i.e. How much electricity that the turbine can generate for given amounts of steam turbine, are the key major factors that drive the economic of geothermal power plant development. So starting 2018, we are initiating a serious effort to find technology breakthrough or innovation in two areas. One is to reduce the resources uncertainty and how to make the well cost cheaper. So our goal is to reduce our well cost by approximately 30 to 40% compared to our average well cost during the past 15 to 20 years, right? Second thing is how to increase the output of our generation turbine. So our goal is to increase our power generation by at least 10 to 15% using the same amount of steam resources. Now, the third thing, also the other area of interest that we are focusing is how to convert just heat into electricity. So the main reason for this is because even though Indonesia is located in the Ring of Fire, many of geothermal resources are actually located in the low to medium geothermal resources, meaning that most of geothermal resources does not have high temperatures or enough pressures to be used in conventional geothermal power plant. So if we can find a new technology or technology innovation or breakthrough on this area, there will be major game changers for development of geothermal energy power plant in Indonesia.
Yeah. Thank you. This is very interesting. So there is general sense of urgency, I have to say, for Indonesia to expedite its efforts towards using renewable energy and achieving its goal for a green economy. Now, what do you think the country needs to do to step forward on the right foot, if I may say?
So I guess the first question is obviously to know how to become a green economy faster. We need to understand where does the carbon emissions come from. Yeah, so I think for developing country like Indonesia, typically 40% of carbon emissions coming from electricity, 30% of carbon emissions coming from industry, 10% coming from transportation. So to reduce carbon emission from transportations, obviously electric vehicle is the right choice to go, and I'm happy that Indonesian government have a serious effort to do this. And recently, Indonesian government is realizing its plan to make Indonesia as one of the manufacturing hub in Southeast Asia for making battery for electric vehicles, right? To reduce carbon emission from electric sectors, obviously choosing the right renewable powers and accelerating and facilitating development of more renewable power generation in Indonesia is the obvious choice.
Thank you, Pak Hendra. Now for more information about what Indonesia's state electricity company is doing to prepare to move beyond fossil fuels and incorporate more renewable energy, I'd like to invite Mr. Zulkifli Zaini, President Director, PT Perusahaan Listrik Negara, or as it is informally called in Indonesia, PLN. Pak Zulkifli has held several roles in various state-owned enterprises over the years, including Independent Commissioner of PT Bank Negara Indonesia, as well as President Director of PT Bank Mandiri prior to his current role. He holds an MBA from the University of Washington and completed a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Bandung Institute of Technology. Pak Zulkifli, thank you so much for joining us today. Carbon neutrality is the call of the day. Is PLN optimistic about carbon neutrality in Indonesia by 2050, 2060?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to represent PLN in this event. And thank you also for this question. This is our dream. In 2030, PLN will begin to retire old and subcritical generators. In 2032, our gas contract with BP Tangguh will be expired. Only combined gas and coal power plant, which is still effective, will be operated as the counterweight to intermittent renewable energy. In 2035, PLN will undergo the second phase of retiring fossil fuel subcritical power plant. In 2040, entering stage 3, PLN will begin to retire critical generators from the fast track program FTP2, and all the fossil fuel subcritical power plant will be replaced by renewable energy based power plant. After that, in 2045, we will retire the first phase of our ultra supercritical power plant. This is going on until 2056, when we will retire all the ultra subcritical power plant left. In the short term, diesel power plants, which are still based on imported fuel at a very high cost, will be replaced with renewable-based power plant and baseload. We are converting expensive, imported and polluting fuel to cheap domestic power base and more environmentally friendly energy. On the other hand, this will accelerate economic growth and create jobs. We will build from the periphery, build new economic growth points, and at the same time, save the nature for future generations.
Thank you. So what is the view of PLN? Is it possible that renewable energy as a base load will be able to compete with fossil or coal power plants?
This is a very good question. Compared to a fossil fuel baseload generator, solar power plant as a baseload will require a battery that functions as a storage system. Currently, the cost for using lithium-ion is still around 12 to 13 cents. But again, humans continue to innovate. The Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, together with PLN, are supported by all components of the nation, and the international community continue to innovate to ensure that 5 or 6% from now, the operating cost of the battery as storage system will decrease, and it probably be closer to 2 until 4 cents. And that's where renewable energy is not only limited to intermittent, but as a baseload. It will be able to compete with fossil fuel. And that's when the development and application of renewable energy will become the power of PLN to ensure that all corners of the country will be electrified with environmentally friendly electricity. In the future, the development application of renewable energy is not solely due to government policy, not only because of the international agreement, but because renewable energy is a system that commercially and economically superior and indeed able to compete with fossil fuel. PLN will not be able to overcome this challenge alone, but we are able to face it in a spirit of togetherness. PLN will move together with all stakeholders to collaborate in innovation towards the direction of this energy development.
Yes, that's right. Partnerships and working together with all stakeholders will certainly yield favorable results. What steps are taken by PLN to increase the use of renewable energy?
PLN's strategy to support the development of renewable energy still takes into account the alignment of supply-demand, local energy potential, economy, reliability, national energy security, and of course, sustainability. PLN is building co-firing power with the use of biomass in coal power plant, which replace some of the fossil fuel. The energy source for co-firing is clearly people-based. PLN has collaborated with the local government, PTPN, Sangyangri, down to the community level to support the provision of land, mobilizing all parties in building the renewable energy electricity ecosystem. With the greater production of renewable energy and increasingly advanced electrical energy storage technology, the electrical system will be able to be operated more intelligently using a smart grid. The smart electricity network that is able to integrate electrical activities from generation on the upstream side to the consumption on the downstream side. With electrical energy leading to zero emission, the current transportation system, which is still fuel-based, which also changed to zero emission by changing fuel vehicle to electric vehicle in transportation sector in 2050, at a time when electricity will be dominated by renewable energy. Once again, I would like to emphasize that PLN is committed to reducing carbon emission not only based on policies or international agreement, but for the future generation so they can enjoy a better future than the present generation.
Thank you, Pak Zulfikli. Thank you, dear panel members, for sharing your insights on various aspects of sustainable corporate practices and showing many different angles of the challenges and opportunities in these areas. Now, in one way or another, I heard from all three of you the vision on longer-term horizon and the longer-term system thinking in your approaches. Ibu Amanda, you spoke about futuristic explorations Thinking at least 10 years ahead as long-term impact of the climate crisis is important. This is particularly relevant for the country like Indonesia, which enjoys what we call a demographic dividend these days. So let me ask you, Ibu Amanda, about youth. Youth plays an important role to influence climate actions taken by government and other stakeholders, including the private sector. How does the Climate Reality Project see the role of youth? How do you encourage their positive engagement in sustainable agenda?
Currently, engaging youth in climate and sustainability activities is becoming a key focus area for governments in many countries, civil societies, educational institutions, international organizations, as well as the private sector. Youth is part of non-state actors. As we know, for years, most of climate actions are in the hand of state actors or governments. But the recognition of actions by non-state actors is one of the key outcomes of COP21, the Paris Agreement. Taking Indonesia as an example, as it is a country vulnerable to climate change, its youth has to put climate change as a high priority issue, especially as some has experienced the effects, including disasters such as floods and drought, crop failure due to extreme weather, clean water supply disruption, and many disasters due to changes in weather patterns, and also, of course, changes in lifestyle. It is necessary to increase climate change awareness, followed by actions in addressing climate change and continuous program for youth. As an example, the Youth Leadership Camp for Climate Crisis, organized by Climate Reality Indonesia, is nurturing young leaders all over Indonesia who are able to influence various levels of society to fight climate change through sustainable and measurable actions. In the last 10 years, we have trained 2,500 youth from all over Indonesia, and they've become agents of change.
Wow, very impressive, Ibu Amanda, and thank you for your insightful response. Pak Hendra, let me now come back to you. We've heard about opportunities in geothermal from you. We also heard perspective from the state-owned PLN. So what do you think is required to accelerate development of renewables in Indonesia?
Thanks, Sophie. So I think learning the success story of how other countries do it. So at the beginnings, the government usually give incentives in form of either attractive tariff or tax incentive or subsidies to accelerate the development of renewable power generation. Then, only after the economic of scale is built up and the manufacturing costs come down, the government will apply a reduced tariff or even abolish the subsidy for the next developments of renewable generation powers. The second factors, which I believe is even more important, we need to change the process of how we develop renewable power generations, i.e. to change it from resources process to manufacturing process. So by that I mean, rather than predicting how many hours we're going to have sunshine tomorrow, or how many knots of wind speed we are going to have tomorrow, or how many megawatts of geothermal wells I'm going to have on my next drilling campaign. Instead, we need to think how to build a more powerful solar panels that can, say, generate 2 times electricity from the same sun. Or how to build a more powerful wind turbine using the same wind speed. And how in geothermal world, and how to build a more efficient geothermal turbine using the same resources, or how to drill geothermal wells that cost 40% lower than the last well that I drilled. So how the government and industry players work hand in hand to address these 2 key important factors will determine the success of development of renewable generation powers in Indonesia.
Very interesting perspective, and thank you so much, Pak Hendra. Now allow me to invite Pak Zulkifli and ask him what opportunities does he see in the transition towards renewable energy?
Today, we are facing extraordinary challenges. The problem of climate change, the world is heating up. Today and in the future, we must ensure that future generations have the right to experience a better future than the present generation. Electrical energy is one of the most important sectors that receive attention, giving its contribution to the formation of greenhouse gases. The government is committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 29% against the projected business as usual scenario emission by 2030. Renewable energy development become an important priority. Therefore, National Renewable Energy (NRE) mix in the national electricity supply is increased to 23% in 2025. Renewable energy generators will be projected to accumulate and reach 10 gigawatts in 2025 and increase again to 15 gigawatts in 2029. We are doing this to reduce carbon emission, striving for decarbonization towards a low carbon economy. For this, PLN is ready to be the force to reduce this carbon. Currently, the size of our electricity sector in Indonesia is 300 TWh. The annual demand growth is about 4.6%. Moving forward in 2050, assuming the demand is 4.6%, the size of electricity sector in Indonesia is about 1,100 TWh. In 2060, the size will be 1,800 TWh. There will be an increase in capacity in 2060 by 1,500 TWh, which means 5 times the electricity capacity this year, wherein will fully committed that the additional capacity will be based on renewable energy. Now the question is, how are we going to achieve that? Innovation and technology development. In the past, renewable energy cost around 25 to 30 cents. Currently, solar power plant in the last auction has approached just 3.6 to 4 cents. But this is renewable energy as an intermittent, not as a baseload, which produce electricity between 10 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The rest still use fossil fuel as baseload. In the future, we are confident that the renewable energy technology will be more competitive and the renewable energy baseload will be able to compete with the fossil fuel baseload. Thank you.
Thank you again to our panel members. Colleagues, we have now approached the end of our discussion today. Of course, I'd like to thank our panelists for their rich insights into the Indonesian experience. Throughout our discussion, we learned that it is important to find a balance between social, economic, and environmental sustainability if we are to achieve 17 SDGs. Transitioning to sustainable practices will be, of course, of interest when there are opportunities which are driven by both profit and policy. We are all reminded that the Paris Agreement on climate change recognizes the importance of climate change education, training, public awareness, public participation, and public access to information and actions on the ground are necessary. Now, let me briefly summarize and give you a few takeaways that I got from this rich discussion today. First of all, there must be networking opportunities to encourage companies to understand the benefits and the overall know-how of sustainable practices. Low carbon coaching was mentioned here. Low carbon coaching in companies is one among many actions to address the climate crisis through creative solutions, in which within company can inspire themselves to maximize their personal and professional potential. Mastering digital tools is also vital, as the ongoing pandemic has shown us. In terms of youth engagement, it is encouraging to note that Indonesia is nurturing young leaders all over the country who can influence various levels of society to fight climate change through sustainable and measurable real actions. We also discussed the possibility of tapping into Indonesia's geothermal resources and converting heat into electricity. There are several key factors to consider when choosing the right renewables resource, including cost, but also the ability to completely replace fossil fuels. We also heard encouraging news from the state electricity provider on plans for use of biomass in coal powder plant, which replaces fossil fuels. With the greater production of renewable energy and increasingly advanced electrical energy storage technology, we could see innovative solutions such as a smart grid, which can integrate electrical activities from generation on the upstream side to consumption on the downstream side. And finally, we end our discussion today with a message of optimism by developing solutions that are innovative, and in partnerships with stakeholders, we can develop sustainable solutions that focus on people and the planet. And we see Indonesia, particularly its corporate sector, on the right track towards achieving the sustainable development goals. Well, let me once again thank you, dear panel members, for the insightful conversation. Let me also express my gratitude to Indonesia Global Compact Network for bringing this discussion to you. Thank you very much for joining us today.